On September 12, 1992, Mark Summers took his 4-year-old son Kevin to the Phoenix Zoo for a father-son day. During a crowded Saturday afternoon, Kevin vanished without a trace near the elephant exhibit. Despite immediate searches by zoo security, police and FBI, no evidence of the boy was ever found. The case became one of Arizona's most baffling disappearances. For 3 decades, Mark Summers dedicated his life to finding his son. His marriage dissolved, his career suffered, but his search never ended. The Phoenix Zoo implemented new security measures, but Kevin's fate remained a mystery that haunted the community. In October 2022, Thomas Rivera, a 73-year-old retired zoo maintenance supervisor dying of lung cancer, summoned Father Miguel Santos to his hospice room. What began as last rites became a stunning confession. Rivera revealed he had witnessed Kevin's death in a tragic accident involving zoo equipment and participated in covering it up to protect the zoo from lawsuits. Rivera's confession detailed how Kevin had wandered into a restricted maintenance area and fell into an industrial mulcher used for composting. Panicked employees, fearing liability and job loss, disposed of the remains and maintained a 30-year code of silence. Rivera's revelation not only solved the mystery, but exposed institutional failures and the devastating impact of choosing reputation over truth. They stood there for nearly 20 minutes watching the elephant's graceful movements. Kevin was mesmerized, commenting on everything from the way their ears flapped to how they used their trunks like hands. Other visitors came and went, but Kevin remained transfixed. Finally, Mark checked his watch. "Hey, Kev, want to go see what's next? Maybe check out those monkeys you mentioned?" Kevin nodded reluctantly, taking one last look at the elephants. "Bye, elephants. See you later." They continued along the Africa Trail, stopping briefly at the lion exhibit where 2 females lounged in the shade, apparently unimpressed by their audience. The male was nowhere to be seen, much to Kevin's disappointment. "Maybe he's sleeping inside," Mark suggested. "Lions sleep like 20 hours a day." "That's a lot," Kevin calculated on his fingers. "That's more than I sleep." The path led them, past the wild dogs, the rhinos, and finally to the primate section. Here, Kevin's energy reached new heights. Spider monkeys swung from branch to branch, their long limbs creating graceful arcs through the air. "Look how fast they go!" Kevin pressed his face against the glass, leaving tiny handprints and breath fog. "I wish I could swing like that. Maybe. When you're older, we'll try rock climbing. It's kind of like monkey swinging for humans." "Really? Promise?" "Promise." Mark glanced at his watch again. 11:15 a.m. They'd been at the zoo for just over an hour, and Kevin showed no signs of slowing down. If anything, each new animal seemed to energize him more. "Hey, buddy, are you getting hungry? Maybe we should think about lunch soon." Kevin considered this seriously. "A little hungry, but can we see more animals first? How about this? We'll check out the bird show that starts at 11:30, then get some lunch. The cafeteria has hot dogs." "With ketchup?" "All the ketchup you want." "Okay." They made their way toward the amphitheater where the bird show was held. Signs along the path advertised, "Wings over Africa," a spectacular display of exotic birds. Other families were heading in the same direction, the crowd beginning to thicken as the day warmed up. Mark felt Kevin's hand in his, small and slightly sweaty. He gave it a gentle squeeze, feeling a surge of paternal pride. These moments, just the 2 of them, exploring and learning together, were precious. Between work demands and daily routines, opportunities for one-on-one time were rare. "Dad?" Kevin's voice broke into his thoughts. "Yeah, buddy. This is the best day ever." Mark smiled, his heart full. "It really is, isn't it?" They found seats in the amphitheater, about halfway up the curved rows. The stage area featured artificial trees and perches, with handlers in zoo uniforms making final preparations. Kevin bounced in his seat, pointing out every detail to Mark. "Look at that huge glove the lady has. I bet that's for an eagle." The show began promptly at 11:30. The presenter, an enthusiastic woman with a wireless microphone, introduced various African birds, a secretary bird with impossibly long legs, a pair of colorful bee-eaters, and yes, a massive African fish eagle that swooped directly over the audience's heads. Kevin watched in absolute wonder, gasping as each bird performed its natural behaviors. When a hornbill hopped across the stage, he tugged on Mark's sleeve. "That bird has eyelashes," he whispered loudly, causing nearby audience members to chuckle. The show concluded with a conservation message about protecting African habitats. As families filed out of the amphitheater, Kevin chattered nonstop about the birds, particularly fascinated by the fact that owls could turn their heads almost all the way around. "Can you do that, Dad?" He attempted to demonstrate, turning his head as far as possible. "Careful there, bud. Humans definitely can't do that. We'd hurt ourselves trying." It was now past noon, and the zoo was noticeably more crowded. The temperature had climbed into the high 80s, typical for September in Phoenix. Mark noticed Kevin beginning to flag slightly, his energy finally catching up with him. "Lunchtime," Mark announced. "Let's fuel up for more adventures." The safari cafe was bustling with families. The smell of hamburgers and French fries mixed with the ambient zoo odors created a uniquely American recreational experience. They joined the cafeteria-style line, Kevin standing on tiptoes to see the food options. "Hot dog, please," he announced to the server, "with lots of ketchup." "And for you, sir?" the teenage server asked Mark. "Cheeseburger and fries and 2 lemonades." They found a table near the windows overlooking the flamingo pond. Kevin attacked his hot dog with enthusiasm, managing to get ketchup on his chin, fingers, and somehow his forehead. "How's the hot dog?" Mark asked, amused. "Good," Kevin mumbled through a mouthful. "Look at the pink birds. Those are flamingos. They're pink because of what they eat, tiny shrimp and algae. If I eat pink food, will I turn pink? Thankfully, no. Though you're turning a bit red from all that ketchup." Mark used a napkin to clean Kevin's face, a gesture so automatic he barely thought about it. These little moments of caretaking, wiping faces, tying shoes, holding hands, formed the rhythm of parenthood. As they ate, Mark mentally reviewed their route. They'd covered about half the zoo so far. Still to see the reptile house, the aquarium, the petting zoo, and the Arizona Trail. Plenty of adventure left for the afternoon. "What do you want to see next?" he asked Kevin. "Snakes," Kevin decided. "And turtles and alligators." The reptile house it is. They finished lunch and deposited their trash in the appropriate bins. Kevin insisted on getting his hand stamped with an invisible ink stamp at the cafe exit. "In case we come back," he explained seriously. The post-lunch crowd was at its peak now. Families pushed strollers, groups of teenagers took selfies, and harried parents tried to corral excited children. Mark kept a firm grip on Kevin's hand as they navigated through the throng. They paused at a gift shop where Kevin pressed his quarters into a penny press machine, creating a souvenir penny with an elephant impression. He added it carefully to his backpack's front pocket, where it joined similar pennies from previous adventures. "My collection is getting bigger," he announced proudly. The reptile house provided cool relief from the afternoon sun. In the dim lighting, illuminated exhibits showcased various snakes, lizards, and amphibians. Kevin was particularly taken with a massive Burmese python, its patterned coils draped over artificial branches. "He's as long as our whole car," Kevin whispered, as if speaking too loudly might wake the sleeping serpent. They moved from exhibit to exhibit, Kevin peppering Mark with questions. "Why don't snakes have legs? How do turtles get in their shells? Can alligators run fast?" Mark answered what he could, read plaques for what he couldn't, and marveled at his son's insatiable curiosity. At the interactive section, Kevin got to touch a docile corn snake under a handler's supervision. His face showed a mixture of fear and delight as the snake's smooth scales slipped through his fingers. "It's not slimy at all," he exclaimed. "It feels like a belt." "That's right," the handler agreed. "A lot of people think snakes are slimy, but they're actually quite dry." They emerged from the reptile house back into the bright afternoon. Mark checked his watch. 2 p.m. They'd been at the zoo for 4 hours, and Kevin was still going strong, fueled by excitement and lunch. "Where to next, Explorer?" Mark asked. Kevin consulted his mental list. "We haven't seen the bears yet, or the otters. Oh, and the penguins. Let's head toward the aquatic section. We can see the otters and penguins there." They walked past the carousel, where calliope music played and children rode painted animals. Kevin looked longingly at it, but didn't ask to ride. They had real animals to see. The path to the aquatic exhibits took them back past the elephant enclosure. A different group of visitors now lined the railing, but the elephants continued their patient routine of eating and dust bathing. "Bye again, elephants," Kevin called out, waving. As they passed the Africa Trail intersection, Mark noticed more zoo staff than usual. Several employees in khaki uniforms were gathered near a service gate, talking urgently into radios. Security guards had appeared at various points along the paths. "Wonder what's going on," Mark murmured, more to himself than Kevin. "Maybe an animal escaped," Kevin suggested excitedly. "Maybe a monkey." "I doubt that, buddy. Probably just routine staff stuff." The alarm clock in Mark and Sandra Summers' bedroom rang at 6 a.m. on Saturday, September 12th, 1992. But Mark was already awake, too excited to sleep. Today was special. His first full day alone with Kevin since starting his new job at Richardson Associates accounting firm 3 months ago. "Today's the day, isn't it?" Sandra mumbled sleepily beside him. "Zoo Day. Kevin's been talking about it all week," Mark confirmed, kissing his wife's forehead. "I promised him we'd see every single animal." Sandra smiled with her eyes still closed. "Don't let him wear you out. He's got more energy than both of us combined." As if on cue, the sound of small feet padding down the hallway announced Kevin's arrival. The bedroom door burst open, revealing a tousled-haired 4-year-old in dinosaur pajamas. "Is it Zoo Day? Is it Zoo Day?" Kevin chanted, launching himself onto the bed between his parents. "It sure is, buddy," Mark laughed, catching his son mid-bounce. "But first things first, breakfast and getting dressed." Kevin's face scrunched in concentration. "Can I wear my dinosaur shirt? The blue one with the T-Rex?" "Absolutely. And my new shoes, the ones with the lights?" "Those too." Sandra sat up, checking the bedside clock. "I need to get ready for work. Mrs. Chen is bringing Tommy over at noon for his checkup." She worked weekends at her pediatric practice, which usually meant Mark handled Saturday childcare. But today was different. Today was their special adventure. While Sandra showered, Mark helped Kevin get dressed, patiently waiting as the boy insisted on fastening his own light-up sneakers. The Velcro straps proved challenging for small fingers, but Kevin was determined to do it himself. "Got it," Kevin finally announced triumphantly. "Look, Daddy." He stomped his feet, making the red lights in the heels flash. "Perfect. Now let's get some breakfast in you." In the kitchen, Mark prepared Kevin's favorite breakfast: scrambled eggs with toast cut into triangles, no crust. Kevin sat at the table, swinging his legs and chattering non-stop about the animals he wanted to see. First the elephants, then the monkeys, then the lions, then the bears. "That's a lot of animals," Mark said, setting the plate in front of him. "We'll see how many we can fit in." Sandra emerged from the bedroom in scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She poured coffee into a travel mug and grabbed her purse from the counter. "You boys have fun today," she said, bending to kiss Kevin's cheek. "Be good for Daddy, okay?" "I'm always good," Kevin protested through a mouthful of eggs. "And Mark," Sandra added, giving her husband a meaningful look, "remember, no cotton candy before lunch. Stay hydrated and don't lose our son." The last comment was meant as a joke, the kind of gentle teasing that comes with 6 years of marriage. Mark grinned and gave a mock salute. "Copy that. No cotton candy, lots of water, keep track of child." "Got it." Sandra kissed him goodbye, grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl and headed for the door. "I should be home by 5. Maybe we can grab dinner at that new Mexican place and sounds good, love you." "Love you too. Bye, pumpkin, bye, mommy," Kevin called, already focused on arranging his toast triangles into a pyramid. After Sandra left, Mark cleaned up the breakfast dishes while Kevin played with his collection of plastic animals on the living room floor. He'd already lined them, up in preparation for their zoo visit. Elephants, tigers, monkeys, and an inexplicable dinosaur that Kevin insisted belonged with the others. Dinosaurs lived with regular animals, Kevin explained seriously when Mark questioned the arrangement. A long, long time ago. Ah, I see. My mistake. Mark checked his camera bag one more time. He'd loaded a fresh roll of film the night before and packed extra batteries for the flash. The Nikon F3 had been a birthday gift from Sandra last year, and he'd become quite the amateur photographer, documenting every milestone of Kevin's life. Today would be no different. He planned to fill an entire album with zoo adventures. At 8:30, they loaded into Mark's Honda Civic. Kevin insisted on carrying his small backpack, which contained what he considered essential supplies: a juice box, a pack of goldfish crackers, his plastic dinosaur, and a handful of quarters he'd been saving for the zoo's penny press machines. All set? Mark asked, checking the rearview mirror as Kevin struggled with his car seat buckles. All set, Kevin confirmed once he heard the satisfying click. The drive to the Phoenix Zoo took about 20 minutes. Mark navigated through Saturday morning traffic while Kevin provided a running commentary on everything they passed. Dogs being walked, interesting clouds, a motorcycle that was super loud, Daddy. They arrived at the zoo parking lot at 9 a.m., an hour before official opening time. Mark had learned from previous outings that arriving early meant shorter lines and cooler temperatures. Even in September, Phoenix could be brutally hot by midday. Look, Daddy, the animal signs. Kevin pointed excitedly at the zoo entrance, where colorful banners featured pictures of elephants, giraffes, and tigers. Mark found a parking spot relatively close to the entrance and helped Kevin out of his car seat. The boy immediately wanted to run ahead, but Mark caught his hand firmly. Remember our rules, Kev. What do we always do in parking lots? Hold hands, Kevin recited dutifully. Cars can't see little kids. That's right. And what about when we're inside the zoo? Stay close to Daddy, don't run away. Perfect, you ready for an adventure? Kevin bounced on his toes, his light-up shoes flashing with each movement. Ready. They joined the small crowd of early arrivals waiting at the entrance gates. Other families had the same idea: beat the heat and the crowds. Mark recognized the familiar mixture of exhausted parents and hyperactive children that characterized every family outing. At exactly 10 a.m. the gates opened. Mark paid for their admission, $8.50 for himself, $4 for Kevin, and received a map of the zoo grounds. The cashier, a teenage girl with braces, smiled at Kevin. First time at the zoo? She asked. Kevin shook his head proudly. No, I've been here before, but not with just Daddy. Usually Mommy comes too. Well, have fun today. Don't forget to check out the new baby giraffe in the Africa Trail. As they entered the zoo proper, Mark felt Kevin's hand tighten with excitement. The path split in 3 directions: left toward the children's petting zoo, straight ahead to the main exhibits, and right toward the Arizona Trail. Where to first, buddy? Mark asked, unfolding the map. Kevin didn't hesitate. Elephants. I want to see the elephants, Mark traced the route on the map. The elephant exhibit was in the Africa Trail section, about a 10-minute walk from the entrance. They'd pass the big cats and the African wild dogs on the way. Elephants it is. Let's go. They set off down the path, Kevin practically vibrating with excitement. The morning air was still relatively cool, and the zoo wasn't yet crowded. Birds called from the aviaries, and somewhere in the distance a lion roared, a sound that made Kevin stop in his tracks. Was that a real lion? He whispered, eyes wide. Sure was. We'll see him later, okay? As they walked, Mark snapped photos. Kevin pointing at a peacock strutting across their path. Kevin making faces at a sleeping koala. Kevin trying to imitate the pose of a bronze gorilla statue. Each shot carefully composed, each moment preserved. They reached a fork in the path, where a zoo employee in khaki shorts was setting up a display table. The young man, whose name tag read Bobby, smiled at them. Morning, folks, just setting up for our conservation talk at 11. You heading to see the elephants? That's right, Mark confirmed. This guy is elephant crazy. Bobby grinned at Kevin. Did you know elephants can't jump? They're the only mammals that can't. Kevin's eyes widened. Really? But they're so big. That's exactly why they can't jump. Too heavy, but they're great swimmers. Wow. Kevin turned to Mark. Dad, did you know that? I did not. Learn something new every day. They continued toward the elephant exhibit. Kevin now spouting elephant facts with the confidence of a seasoned zoologist. The path wound through carefully landscaped gardens designed to mimic African savanna, complete with acacia trees and red rock formations. As they approached the elephant viewing area, they could hear the excited chatter of other visitors. A small crowd had gathered at the railing, and Mark lifted Kevin onto his shoulders for a better view. I can see them, Kevin squealed. Look, Daddy, the big one is eating. 3 African elephants stood in the expansive enclosure, casually pulling hay from suspended feeders. The largest, a matriarch named Duchess according to the information placard, used her trunk with delicate precision to select choice pieces of vegetation. Mark lowered Kevin back to the ground and pulled out his camera. Stand here by the sign. Kev, let me get a picture of you with the elephants in the background. Kevin posed enthusiastically, throwing his arms wide and grinning. Mark snapped several shots capturing his son's pure joy. In the viewfinder, Kevin looked so small against the backdrop of the massive animals, yet his excitement seemed to fill the entire frame. Can we watch them eat? Kevin asked, pressing against the railing. Sure, buddy. We've got all day. But something felt different. The atmosphere had shifted subtly. Mark noticed other parents pulling their children a bit closer, voices lowering. Staff members were scanning the crowds with unusual intensity. They continued toward the aquatic exhibits, Kevin chattering about whether penguins would be black and white like in his picture books. Mark half listened, his attention divided between his son's monologue and the increased security presence. At the otter exhibit, Kevin immediately pressed against the glass, watching the playful creatures dive and spiral through the water. A keeper was conducting a feeding demonstration, tossing fish to the eager animals. They're so fast, Kevin observed. Look how they swim. Mark lifted his camera to capture Kevin's delighted expression. The otters blurred in motion behind the glass. Through the viewfinder, his son looked perfect. Eyes bright, smile wide, completely absorbed in the moment. It was 2:30 p.m. when they left the otter exhibit. The penguin habitat was just around the corner, Kevin already pulling ahead in his excitement. Slow. Down, bud, Mark called. They're not going anywhere. Kevin waited impatiently as Mark caught up, bouncing on his light-up shoes. Come on, Dad. I want to see if they really slide on their bellies. They rounded the corner toward the penguin exhibit, Kevin's hand slipping from Mark's grasp as he darted ahead. Mark followed, camera ready, prepared to capture his son's reaction. To the tuxedoed birds. He didn't know it yet, but he had just taken the last photograph he would ever take of his son. The crowd around the penguin exhibit was thick, families pressed against the viewing windows. Mark momentarily lost sight of Kevin's blue dinosaur shirt in the sea of visitors. Kevin, he called, not yet concerned. Kev, wait up. He pushed politely through the crowd, expecting to find his son pressed against the glass with the other children. But Kevin wasn't there. Kevin? Mark's voice rose slightly. He scanned the crowd. So many children, so many blue shirts, but no dinosaur print. A mother with a stroller noticed his searching. Looking for someone? My son. 4 years old. Blonde. Hair, blue dinosaur shirt. Mark's heart was beginning to race. He was just here. The woman shook her head sympathetically. I haven't seen him, but it's so crowded. He's probably just around the corner. Mark pushed through the crowd more urgently now. Kevin, where are you? He checked the nearby restrooms. Empty. The gift shop, no Kevin, back to the penguin exhibit. Still no sign of his son. Time seemed to slow and speed up simultaneously. How long had Kevin been out of sight? 30 seconds? Minute, 2, Kevin. Mark was shouting now, not caring about disturbing other visitors. Kevin Summers. More people began to notice his distress. A zoo employee, the same Bobby from earlier, approached quickly. "Sir, what's wrong?" "My son. He's missing." He was right. "Here and then?" Mark's voice cracked. "He's only 4, blue shirt with a dinosaur." Bobby immediately pulled out his radio. "Code Adam at the Penguin exhibit. Missing child, 4 years old, blonde hair, blue dinosaur shirt." The response was immediate. Mark could see security guards converging from different directions. Other zoo employees began checking nearby exhibits and facilities. "When did you last see him?" Bobby asked, his training kicking in. "Just now, maybe 2 minutes ago. He ran ahead to see the penguins and then—" Mark ran his hands through his hair. "He was right here." "Okay, sir. We have protocols. For this, kids wander off all the time. We usually find them within minutes." But as those minutes ticked by with no sign of Kevin, Mark's panic evolved into something deeper and more primal. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. He'd been right there. Right there. Security guards were now stopping families at exit points. The PA system crackled to life. "Attention zoo visitors, we are looking for a 4-year-old boy named Kevin. Blonde hair, blue shirt with a dinosaur. If you see this child, please notify the nearest zoo employee immediately." Mark stood in the center of the growing chaos, his world collapsing around him. 20 minutes ago, Kevin had been holding his hand, talking about penguins. Now he was gone. "We'll find him," Bobby assured him, though the young man's face showed increasing concern. Kids don't just disappear, but Kevin had done exactly that. Vanished between the otters and the penguins, somewhere in the 50 feet of crowded pathway. Disappeared in broad daylight in a zoo full of families, under the watchful eyes of dozens of adults. It was 2:45 p.m. on September 12, 1992. Kevin Summers, 4 years old, dinosaur enthusiast and elephant lover, had been at the Phoenix Zoo for 4 hours and 45 minutes. He would never be seen again. By 3 p.m., the Phoenix Zoo had transformed from a place of family entertainment into a crime scene. The cheerful chatter of visitors was replaced by urgent radio communications and increasingly frantic shouts of "Kevin!" echoing across the exhibits. Mark Summers stood at the zoo's security office, his hands shaking as he filled out a missing child report. The questions seemed absurdly mundane given the circumstances. Height, about 3'6". Weight, maybe 40 pounds. Distinguishing marks? A small scar above his right eyebrow from falling off his tricycle last year. What was he wearing again? The security supervisor, James Morrison, was a former Phoenix police officer who'd taken the zoo job for its supposed lower stress. His calm demeanor belied the gravity of the situation. Blue shirt with a dinosaur, a T-Rex, jean shorts, white sneakers with red lights in the heels. Mark's voice was mechanical, his mind still refusing to accept what was happening. "He has a small backpack, red with a Superman logo." Morrison nodded, relaying the information through his radio to the growing search team. "And you last saw him at the penguin exhibit?" He ran ahead. "Just for a second. I was right behind him. And then—" Mark's voice broke. "How does a child just vanish? Children are quick, Mr. Summers, and small. They can slip through crowds, hide in places adults wouldn't think to look. We've had kids turn up in the strangest places, behind exhibit barriers, in maintenance areas, even sleeping in the bathroom stalls. But this felt different, and everyone knew it. By now, Kevin had been missing for nearly 30 minutes. The zoo's emergency protocols had kicked into full gear. All exits were sealed, with security checking every person leaving the grounds. Staff members were pulled from their regular duties to join the search. The Phoenix Police Department arrived at 3:15 p.m. Detective Patricia Martinez, a 20-year veteran with salt and pepper hair and keen brown eyes, took charge of the scene. She'd worked dozens of missing children cases, most resolving within hours. But something about this one set off her internal alarms. "I need to speak with the father," she told Morrison. Mark was led to a quiet corner of the security office. "Detective." Martinez studied him carefully, disheveled from the search, eyes red with unshed tears but coherent and cooperative. "Mr. Summers, I'm Detective Martinez. I know you've already told your story several times, but I need you to walk me through everything again. Every detail, no matter how small. Mark recounted the day from the beginning, breakfast at home, arriving at the zoo, their route through the exhibits. As he spoke, Martinez took notes and asked probing questions. You mentioned your wife is at work? Yes, at St. Joseph's. She's a pediatric nurse. I called her. She's on her way. Any marital problems? Custody issues? Mark blinked, in surprise. No, nothing like that. We've been married 6 years. We're happy. Any relatives who might have taken Kevin? Grandparents, aunts, uncles? My parents live in Chicago. Sandra's are in Tucson. They see Kevin regularly, but the implication hit him. You think someone took him? That this isn't just him being lost? Martinez kept her expression neutral. We have to consider all possibilities, Mr. Summers. In most cases, children are found quickly, but we treat every missing child report as a potential abduction until proven otherwise. The word abduction seemed to transform Mark physically. He slumped in his chair, the reality finally crashing over him. Oh God, someone took my son. We don't know that yet, Martinez said firmly. Let's focus on finding Kevin. I need you. To think, did you notice anyone following you today? Anyone paying unusual attention to Kevin? Mark struggled to remember. The day had been so normal, so perfect. There were so many people, families everywhere. I wasn't looking for... why would I? The FBI arrived at 3:45 p.m. Special Agent David Kim, a specialist in child abductions, immediately began coordinating with local law enforcement. The statistics were grim. In stranger abduction cases, the first 3 hours were critical. They were already 90 minutes into that window. Sandra Summers burst into the security office at 4:00 p.m., still in her hospital scrubs. Where is he? Where's Kevin? She saw Mark and ran to him, their embrace desperate and frightening. We're going to find him, Mark whispered into her hair, though his voice lacked conviction. Outside, the search intensified. Zoo employees, police officers, and FBI agents methodically worked through the 125-acre property. Every building was searched, every bathroom checked, every exhibit examined. K-9 units arrived, the dogs given Kevin's scent from clothes and marks. The media got wind of the story by 4:30 p.m. News vans began arriving at the zoo entrance, reporters setting up for live broadcasts. Kevin's picture, the one Mark had taken that morning by the elephant exhibit, was already being prepared for the evening news. Thomas Rivera, the zoo's maintenance supervisor, coordinated the search of employee-only areas. A 43-year-old veteran of the zoo, Rivera knew every inch of the property, every service tunnel, every storage room, every forgotten corner where a child might wander or hide. Check everywhere, he instructed his team. Every closet, every cabinet, look in places a kid couldn't possibly get to on their own. Leave nothing unchecked. Rivera himself led the search of the most sensitive areas, the veterinary facilities, the food preparation kitchens, the dangerous equipment rooms. His team was thorough but found no trace of Kevin. By 5:00 p.m., the zoo was officially closed to visitors. Families were escorted out, their children counted and checked against the description of Kevin Summers. The normally bustling paths fell eerily quiet, except for the calls of searchers and the static of police radios. Detective Martinez interviewed zoo employees who'd been working near the penguin exhibit. Janet Walsh, a bird keeper, remembered seeing a man with a camera near the exhibit around 2:30. He was taking a lot of pictures, she recalled. But that's not unusual. Lots of people photograph the penguins. Can you describe him? Middle-aged, maybe 40s. Baseball cap, sunglasses. Honestly, he looked like half the dads here today. Security footage from the zoo's cameras was pulled and reviewed. The technology in 1992 was limited. Grainy black and white images from fixed positions. The camera nearest the penguin exhibit showed crowds of people, but the quality made it impossible to identify individuals clearly. As darkness approached, temporary lights were brought in to continue the search. Volunteers from the community began arriving, wanting to help. A command center was established in the zoo's education building, with maps divided into search grids. Mark and Sandra were interviewed repeatedly, separately, and together. The same questions over and over. Any enemies? Any threats? Any unusual incidents in recent weeks? There's nothing, Sandra insisted, tears streaming down her face. We're normal people. We go to work. We raise our son. We live our lives. Why is this happening? Dr. Sarah Chen, a child psychologist brought in by the FBI, gently probed for more personal details. How has Kevin been lately? Any behavioral changes? New fears? He's been excited about starting preschool, Mark said. Maybe a little clingy at bedtime, but nothing unusual. Any new people in your lives? Babysitters, neighbors, co-workers? We use the same babysitter we've had for 2 years, Sandra replied. Mrs. Patterson. She's 60 years old and loves Kevin like a grandson. The search expanded beyond the zoo grounds as night fell. Police went door to door in nearby neighborhoods. The Arizona Department of Public Safety issued an alert to all. Law enforcement agencies. Border crossings were notified. Phoenix was only 150 miles from Mexico. By 9 p.m., the search at the zoo was suspended for the night, though security remained on high alert. Mark and Sandra were convinced to go home, though neither wanted to leave. What if he comes back? Sandra asked desperately. What if he's hiding somewhere and comes out when it's quiet? We have people here all night, Detective Martinez assured. If Kevin is still in the zoo, we'll find him. The drive home was surreal. The house felt empty. Wrong. Kevin's toys were scattered in the living room exactly as he'd left them that morning. His cereal bowl was still in the sink. His bed remained unmade, his stuffed animals arranged just as he liked them. Sandra collapsed on Kevin's bed, clutching his favorite bear. Mark stood in the doorway, unable to enter or leave. The silence was unbearable. No chattering voice, no running feet, no requests for just one more story. The phone rang constantly, concerned friends, family members who'd seen the news, reporters requesting interviews. Mark's parents called from Chicago, already packing to fly to Phoenix. Sandra's mother in Tucson was hysterical, requiring Sandra's father to take the phone. Around midnight, Detective Martinez called with an update, or rather a non-update. Nothing yet, but we're not giving up. Tomorrow we'll have even more resources. Helicopters, more volunteers, expanded search areas. He's afraid of the dark, Mark said numbly. He has a nightlight shaped like a rocket ship. He won't sleep without it. We'll find him, Mr. Summers. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. But sleep was impossible. Mark and Sandra sat in Kevin's room, surrounded by evidence of their son's existence. His drawings covered the refrigerator, stick figures labeled "Me and Daddy at Zoo," now taking on heartbreaking significance. Remember when he drew this? Sandra held up a crayon picture of an elephant. He was so proud because he remembered to include the tusks. Mark nodded, unable to speak. Every object in the room told a story, represented a moment now possibly lost forever. The half-finished Lego castle on the dresser, the library books due back on Tuesday, the Superman cape hanging on the doorknob. At 3 a.m., exhaustion finally overtook them. They lay in their own bed, fully clothed, holding each other but not sleeping. Every sound made them jump. Was that the door? Footsteps? Kevin coming home? Sunday, September 13th, 1992 dawn brought no relief, only harsh reality. Kevin had been missing for 18 hours. The critical first 24 hours were ticking away rapidly. By 7 a.m., the zoo was again swarming with searchers. The volunteer count had swelled to over 300 people. A staging area was set up in the parking lot, with volunteers assigned to teams and given specific search areas. The media presence had exploded overnight. Kevin's disappearance led every local newscast. His photograph, that final image of him, grinning by the elephant exhibit, was everywhere. The morning papers carried banner headlines, "Boy 4 vanishes from Phoenix Zoo." Mark's parents arrived from Chicago on the first flight. Sandra's parents drove up from Tucson, the small house filled with family members, all wanting to help, but not knowing how. "You should eat something," Mark's mother Margaret urged, offering A plate of toast neither Mark nor Sandra could stomach. I need to be out there searching, Mark insisted, pacing the living room. The police said to stay here in case someone calls, Sandra reminded him, her voice hollow. The FBI had set up phone monitoring equipment, preparing for a possible ransom demand. Agent Kim explained the protocol. If someone calls, keep them talking. We need at least 30 seconds to attempt a trace. Stay calm, agree to their demands, get as much information as possible. But the phone remained silent except for calls from reporters and well-meaning friends. At the zoo, the search had become more systematic. Teams of volunteers walked shoulder to shoulder across open areas. Every building was searched again. Divers were brought in to check the water features, the seal pool, the flamingo pond, even the narrow moats around certain exhibits. Thomas Rivera led specialized teams through the zoo's extensive behind-the-scenes areas. The maintenance tunnels, storage facilities, and equipment rooms were thoroughly examined. Rivera knew these areas better than anyone. He'd worked at the zoo for 20 years, starting as a groundskeeper and working his way up to maintenance supervisor. Check every locked room, he instructed his team. Every closet, every storage container, use your master keys. Nothing is off limits. The old bear exhibit, decommissioned in the 1980s and now used for storage, was searched. The abandoned aviary, building scheduled for demolition, was examined. Even the underground tunnels carrying utilities were explored. By noon, discouragement was setting in. No trace of Kevin had been found. No credible sightings. No ransom demands. It was as if he had simply evaporated. Detective Martinez expanded the investigation. Every zoo employee was interviewed extensively. Background checks were initiated. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit created profiles of potential suspects. We're looking at several possibilities, Agent Kim explained to Mark and Sandra. Stranger abduction is actually rare. Most children are taken by someone they know. But given the public location and timing, we can't rule it out. The investigation revealed several employees with minor criminal records, mostly old drug charges or DUIs. A janitor named Carl Peterson had a dismissed assault charge from 1987. A part-time gift shop employee had been arrested for shoplifting 5 years earlier. All were questioned extensively, but had solid alibis. The security footage was enhanced and analyzed frame by frame. A man matching the description given by the bird keeper, middle-aged, baseball cap, sunglasses, appeared in several shots, but the quality made identification impossible. He seemed to be alone, just another visitor enjoying the zoo. Tips poured in from the public. A child matching Kevin's description was seen at a McDonald's in Tempe. Another was spotted at a grocery store in Scottsdale. Each lead was investigated. Each proved false. By Sunday evening, the volunteer search effort was scaled back. The professionals continued, but hope was fading for finding Kevin in or around the zoo. The investigation shifted focus to the possibility of abduction. Monday, September 14, 1992, the zoo reopened to the public, though areas remained cordoned off for investigation. Some visitors came out of morbid curiosity, others to leave flowers and stuffed animals at a makeshift memorial near the entrance. Mark returned to the zoo, unable to stay away. He retraced their route from Saturday, stopping at each exhibit they'd visited. The elephants were in their morning routine, unaware that the little boy who'd waved goodbye would never return. At the penguin exhibit, Mark stood where he'd last seen Kevin. How had it happened? How had his son vanished in the seconds it took to push through the crowd? He played the moment over and over in his mind, searching for the detail he'd missed, the clue that would bring Kevin home. Thomas Rivera found him there, staring at the penguins through the glass. "Mr. Summers, I'm Tom Rivera, maintenance supervisor. I'm so sorry about your son." Mark nodded numbly. "They say he's probably not here anymore, that someone took him. But I keep thinking, what if he's hurt somewhere? What if he's trapped? We've searched everywhere," Rivera said gently. "Every room, every space a child could possibly get into. If he was here, we would have found him." "You're sure? Absolutely sure?" Rivera hesitated for just a moment. Yes, I'm sure. But something in his voice, some slight tremor, made Mark look at him more closely. Rivera's eyes didn't quite meet his, and there was a sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the morning coolness. Is there something you're not telling me? Mark asked. No, nothing. I wish we could have found him. I have kids myself. I can't imagine. Rivera walked away quickly, leaving Mark with an unsettled feeling he couldn't quite identify. The week that followed blurred into a nightmare of press conferences, police interviews, and futile searches. Mark took indefinite leave from his job. Sandra tried to return to work, but broke down when she saw a child Kevin's age in the emergency room. The case went national. Kevin's picture appeared on milk cartons. America's Most Wanted aired a segment. Tips came in from across the country, but none led anywhere. A week became a month became 6 months. The intensive investigation scaled back, though the case remained officially open. The FBI maintained involvement, but other cases demanded attention. Mark quit his job entirely, dedicating himself to finding Kevin. He hired private investigators, consulted psychics, followed every lead no matter how unlikely. Sandra tried to maintain some normalcy, but their marriage was crumbling under the weight of grief and guilt. You have to accept that he might not be coming back, Sandra said one night, 6 months after Kevin's disappearance. Never, Mark replied. I'll never stop looking. 1 year later, September 12, 1993, the first anniversary of Kevin's disappearance, brought renewed media attention. A candlelight vigil was held at the zoo, attended by hundreds of supporters. Mark spoke to the crowd, his voice breaking. Kevin loved this zoo. He loved the elephants and the monkeys and the penguins. He was so excited that morning, so happy. I have to believe he's still out there somewhere, that someone will have the courage to come forward with information. Sandra stood beside him but said nothing. The past year had aged them both terribly. Their marriage was hanging by a thread, sustained only by their shared loss. Thomas Rivera attended the vigil, standing in the back of the crowd. He'd lost weight over the past year, his face gaunt and his hands trembling slightly. Colleagues attributed it to stress. The zoo had implemented massive security changes after Kevin's disappearance, and Rivera had overseen much of the work. 5 years later, 1997, the Summers divorce was finalized on a rainy Tuesday in March. They'd tried to hold things together, but grief had driven them in different directions. Mark remained obsessed with finding Kevin, while Sandra needed to find a way to live with the loss. I'm not giving up on him, Sandra said as they signed the papers. I can't live like this anymore, in limbo, waiting for a ghost. Mark understood but couldn't follow her path. He'd sold their house, unable to bear the memories. He lived in a small apartment now, its walls covered with maps, timelines, and theories about Kevin's disappearance. He still visited the zoo regularly, still stood at the penguin exhibit trying to understand. The staff knew him, treated him gently. Some whispered that he'd lost his mind, but others understood a father's inability to let go. Thomas Rivera had been promoted to director of operations, but the promotion brought no joy. He'd developed a drinking problem, his marriage strained. By his increasing volatility, he avoided the penguin exhibit entirely, taking long detours rather than walk past it. 10 years later, 2002. A decade had passed. Kevin would have been 14, starting high school. Mark imagined what his son might look like. Taller, voice changed, but still with those bright blue eyes and infectious smile. The case was cold, but not forgotten. Detective Martinez had retired, but she still called Mark on the anniversary each year. The FBI file remained open but inactive. New technologies like DNA analysis offered hope, but there was no evidence to test. Sandra had remarried, moved to California. She had 2 daughters now, but kept Kevin's picture on her mantle. She sent Mark Christmas cards, but otherwise they had no contact. Too much pain in their shared history. The Phoenix Zoo had changed dramatically. Security cameras covered every angle. New protocols required multiple staff checks of all areas. Child safety had become a primary focus, With dedicated family areas and constant monitoring, Thomas Rivera was nearing retirement, his body broken by years of physical labor and his mind tortured by secrets. He'd tried to quit several times, but couldn't bring himself to leave. The zoo was his penance, his prison. 20 years later, 2012, most people had forgotten about Kevin Summers. New tragedies had captured public attention. The zoo staff who'd been there in 1992 had mostly retired or moved on. Only a few old-timers remembered the boy who'd vanished by the penguins. Mark, now 52, still lived in Phoenix. He'd never remarried, never had other children. His life remained frozen in September 1992, waiting for answers that seemed increasingly unlikely to come. He'd channeled his obsession into advocacy work, helping other families of missing children. He understood their pain, their desperate hope, their refusal to accept the unacceptable. But even among that sad fraternity, 20 years was an extraordinary length of time to maintain active hope. Sandra rarely spoke of Kevin to her new family. The pain had scarred over but never truly healed. Her daughters knew they had a brother who'd died, but the details were kept vague. Some wounds were too deep to expose. 30 years later, 2022, Phoenix had grown enormously. The zoo now surrounded by urban development that hadn't existed in 1992. The penguin exhibit had been renovated twice, the old viewing area completely redesigned. Few visitors knew about the tragedy that had occurred there 3 decades earlier. Mark Summers, now 62, had finally begun to accept that he would likely die without knowing what happened to his son. He still lived in Phoenix, still visited the zoo occasionally, but the burning obsession had mellowed into a dull, permanent ache. On September 10, 2022, Thomas Rivera was admitted to St. Joseph's Hospital. The diagnosis was terminal lung cancer, aggressive and metastatic. The doctors gave him weeks, maybe a month. Rivera had lived with his secret for 30 years. It had poisoned everything. His marriage, long since ended. His relationship with his children, his ability to find peace. Now, facing death, the weight of that secret became unbearable. On October 15, 2022, he asked to see a priest. Father Miguel Santos arrived expecting a routine last rites visit. He'd been serving the hospital for 10 years, had heard countless deathbed confessions. Most were minor, old grudges, petty thefts, marital infidelities. But Thomas Rivera's confession would be different. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned," Rivera began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've carried this for 30 years. I've lived in hell and I'm about to meet my judgment. God forgives all who truly repent," Father Santos said gently. "What weighs on your soul?" Rivera's eyes filled with tears. "The boy, Kevin Summers. I know what happened to him." Father Santos felt his blood run cold. The Summers case was legendary in Phoenix, the kind of unsolved mystery that haunted a community for generations. "Tell me," he said softly. "It was an accident," Rivera began, his words coming in short gasps between labored breaths. "But what we did after, that was no accident. That was evil. Pure evil. What followed was a confession that would finally solve one of Arizona's most enduring mysteries, but bring no comfort to those who'd waited 30 years for answers." Rivera spoke for nearly an hour, pausing frequently as pain racked his cancer-riddled body. Father Santos listened in growing horror, torn between his priestly vows of confidentiality and his human desire for justice. When Rivera finished, both men were crying. "You have to tell them," Rivera begged. "The father, Mark Summers, he needs to know. I've watched him suffer for 30 years. Please, Father. I know you can't break the seal of confession while I'm alive, but after I'm gone." Father Santos nodded slowly. The seal of confession was absolute while the penitent lived, but after death, if the confession involved others who should know the truth. "I'll do what I can," he promised. "Make your peace with God, Thomas. Pray for forgiveness, not just from the Lord, but from those you've wronged." Thomas Rivera died on October 22, 2022, taking his secret to the grave, but not beyond it. 3. Days after the funeral, Father Santos sat in his office, wrestling with his conscience. The seal of confession was sacred, but Rivera had explicitly asked him to reveal the truth after his death. More importantly, there were others involved who might still face justice. Finally, he picked up the phone and called the Phoenix Police Department. "I need to speak with someone about the Kevin Summers case," he said. "I have information that might finally solve it." Detective Marcus Williams was only 6 years old when Kevin Summers disappeared, but like everyone who grew up in Phoenix, he knew the story. The case was taught at the police academy as an example of a perfect crime. No body, no evidence, no witnesses. Just a 4-year-old boy who vanished into thin air. Now, 30 years later, Williams sat in an interview room at Phoenix PD headquarters, staring at Father Miguel Santos with barely contained skepticism. False confessions were common in high-profile cold cases. Deathbed confessions were often unreliable, confused ramblings of guilty minds seeking absolution for unrelated sins. "Father Santos," Williams began carefully, "I appreciate you coming forward, but you have to understand, we get dozens of confessions about this case every year. What makes you believe Mr. Rivera's story is credible?" The priest's hands trembled slightly as he placed a worn notebook on the table, because he knew details that were never made public, things only someone who was there could know. Williams leaned forward, interest piqued. "Such as the boy's backpack," Father Santos said quietly. It was red with a Superman logo. Inside was a juice box, goldfish crackers, a plastic dinosaur, and quarters for the penny press machines. That information was never released to the media. Williams felt a chill run down his spine. He opened the case file in front of him, flipping to the inventory of Kevin's belongings. Every item Father Santos mentioned was listed. "Go on," he said, his skepticism evaporating. "May I read from my notes?" Father Santos asked. "I wrote down everything Thomas told me immediately after our conversation, while it was still fresh." Williams nodded, activating the recording equipment. "Please state your name and the date for the record." Father Miguel Santos, October 25th, 2022. These are notes from a confession I received from Thomas Rivera on October 15th, 2022, 1 week before his death. The priest opened his notebook and began to read in a steady voice. According to Thomas Rivera, the events of September 12, 1992, unfolded as follows. Kevin Summers did vanish from the penguin exhibit, but not in the way everyone assumed. The Yao boy had wandered into a restricted area through an unmarked maintenance door that had been propped open by a worker. This door led to the back areas of the aquatic exhibits, where the filtration systems and other equipment were housed. Rivera was working in that area that afternoon, along with 2 other maintenance workers, Miguel Vasquez and Robert Chen. They were cleaning the massive filtration system for the seal pool, a routine but dangerous job involving industrial, chemicals, and heavy machinery. Kevin apparently wandered through the door, while following what he thought was a zookeeper. The maintenance area was a maze of pipes, machines, and narrow walkways. By the time the workers noticed him, he had climbed onto a platform near the main filtration tank. Rivera said Kevin was curious about the machinery, asking questions about how it worked. They tried to coax him down, but the boy was fascinated by the spinning mechanisms and bubbling water. That's when the accident happened. A section of the platform's railing, corroded by years of exposure to chemicals and moisture, gave way when Kevin leaned against it. The boy fell approximately 15 feet into the primary filtration tank, which was running at full capacity. The workers immediately shut down the system and pulled Kevin out, but it was too late. The combination of the fall and the powerful suction of the filtration system had killed him instantly. Rivera performed CPR, but the boy was gone. This is where the confession turns from tragic accident to criminal conspiracy. The 3 men panicked. The maintenance area was supposed to be secured. The door should have been locked. The platform should have been repaired months earlier. They knew the zoo would face massive lawsuits. They could lose their jobs, possibly face criminal charges for negligence. In their panic, they made a decision that would haunt them forever. They decided to dispose of Kevin's body and pretend they'd never seen him. Rivera described in horrible detail how they wrapped the boy's body in industrial plastic sheeting and placed it in a maintenance cart. They cleaned every trace of the accident from the filtration room. They fixed the broken railing with quick-setting cement. They made it look like Kevin had never been there. But disposing of the body was a problem. The zoo was swarming with searchers by then. Security was everywhere. They couldn't leave the grounds without being noticed. That's when Rivera remembered the old incinerator in the veterinary complex. It was used for disposing of deceased animals, operating at extremely high temperatures. It was scheduled for use that night to dispose of a zebra that had died of natural causes earlier in the week. They waited until after dark, when the search had been temporarily suspended. Using their maintenance keys and knowledge of the zoo's blind spots, they transported Kevin's body to the veterinary complex. They placed him in the incinerator along with the zebra carcass and activated the system. By morning, there was nothing left but ashes, which were disposed of according to the zoo's normal procedures, scattered in the desert miles from the facility. The three men swore an oath of silence. They returned to work the next day and joined the search for Kevin, knowing full well they'd never find him. They watched Mark and Sandra Summers plead for their son's return. They saw the community rally to help. They kept their secret as the years passed and hope faded. Rivera said the guilt destroyed all three of them in different ways. Robert Chen committed suicide in 1998, leaving a note that mentioned unforgivable sins but gave no specifics. Miguel Vasquez developed severe alcoholism and died in a drunk driving accident in 2005. Rivera himself lived with crippling depression and anxiety, self-medicating with alcohol and prescription drugs. He said he wanted to confess many times over the years but was terrified of the consequences. He watched Mark Summers return to the zoo year after year, saw him age and break under the weight of not knowing. The guilt was like acid in his soul, eating away at everything good in his life. Now, facing death, Rivera couldn't meet his maker with this burden. He begged me to find a way to tell the truth after he was gone. He wrote a letter to Mark Summers, which he gave to me, explaining everything and begging for forgiveness he knew he didn't deserve. That's the confession, Detective. Thomas Rivera knew what happened to Kevin Summers because he was there, because he helped cover it up, because he spent 30 years living with the knowledge that a moment of panic had led to a lifetime of suffering for an innocent family. Father Santos closed the notebook and looked up at Detective Williams, whose face had gone pale. "Jesus Christ," Williams muttered, then caught himself. "Sorry, Father. I've heard worse," Father Santos replied sadly. "Do you believe it?" Williams was already pulling up records on his computer. Miguel Vasquez, Robert Chen, both deceased. Causes of death match Rivera's account. He continued typing. Maintenance logs from September 1992. There was scheduled work on the seal pool filtration system that day. 3-person crew assigned: Rivera, Vasquez, and Chen. He grabbed his phone and called the district attorney's office. "We need a search warrant for the Phoenix Zoo veterinary complex, specifically any records related to the incinerator use in September 1992. Within hours, a team of investigators descended on the zoo. 30 years had passed, but institutions like zoos kept meticulous records. In a dusty storage room, they found the veterinary logs from 1992. The entry for September 12-13, 1992, confirmed that the incinerator had been used to dispose of a zebra named Zara, who had died of old age. The log showed the incinerator had run for 6 hours overnight, much longer than normally required for a single animal. The unusual duration had been noted, but attributed to mechanical issues requiring extended operation. The maintenance records revealed more damning evidence. A work order dated September 14, 1992, showed emergency repairs to a platform in the seal filtration room. The reason listed was structural failure, with no additional details. The repair was signed off by Thomas Rivera. Security footage from 1992 had long since been destroyed, but investigators found architectural plans showing the maintenance door that Kevin had apparently wandered through. It was located just 20 feet from the public viewing area of the penguin exhibit, hidden behind landscaping. Armed with this evidence, Detective Williams had one more crucial task. He needed to inform Mark Summers. Mark was living in a retirement community in Scottsdale. At 62, he looked older, worn down by 3 decades of unanswered questions. When Williams called to arrange a meeting, Mark's voice was resigned. "Another false lead?" he asked. "I've heard them all, Detective." "No, Mr. Summers, this time we have answers, real answers." They met at Mark's apartment. Williams brought Father Santos and the case file. For 2 hours they laid out the entire story, the confession, the supporting evidence, the tragic truth of what had happened to Kevin. Mark listened in silence, his face cycling through shock, anger, grief, and something like relief. When they finished, he sat quietly for so long that Williams wondered if they should call a doctor. Finally, Mark spoke. 30 years, I've imagined every possible scenario. Kidnapping, murder, trafficking. I've had nightmares about what Kevin might have suffered. But this, an accident, a stupid preventable accident, and they just threw him away like garbage. His voice broke on the last word. Father Santos reached out to comfort him, but Mark waved him off. Did Rivera say, did Kevin suffer? Was he scared? Father Santos consulted his notes. Rivera said it was instant. The fall in the machinery. Kevin wouldn't have had time to be afraid. It would have been over in seconds. Mark nodded slowly. And these men, Rivera, the others, they just went on with their lives, worked at the zoo, saw me there year after year and said nothing. The guilt destroyed them, William said. 2 are dead. Rivera died in agony. It doesn't excuse what they did, but they paid a price. Not enough, Mark said quietly. Not nearly enough. The news of the case's resolution made national headlines. After 30 years, one of America's most puzzling missing child cases had been solved. The Phoenix Zoo faced intense scrutiny, though the current administration had no connection to the 1992 staff. Sandra, Kevin's mother, now living in California, gave one brief statement to the press. I'm grateful to finally have answers, though. They bring no peace. My son died because of negligence and cowardice. He deserved better. We all did. I hope this revelation leads to better safety protocols, and, more importantly, a culture where protecting reputation never takes precedence over truth and justice. The zoo implemented even more stringent safety measures and established the Kevin Summers Memorial Fund for Child Safety Initiatives. A plaque was installed near the renovated penguin exhibit. In memory of Kevin Summers, 1988-1992, may his tragedy remind us that our children's safety must always be our highest priority. Mark Summers held a private memorial service for Kevin on what would have been his 34th birthday. Without a body to bury, he created a small memorial in a Scottsdale cemetery, a headstone with Kevin's picture and an inscription, Kevin Michael. Summers' beloved son, your light still shines. Your laughter still echoes forever forever loved. Legal proceedings followed, though with all 3 perpetrators dead. Justice in the traditional sense was impossible. The zoo settled civil claims with the Summers family, though no amount of money could compensate for 30 years of agony. The case files, once filling entire rooms, were finally closed. The mystery that had haunted Phoenix for 3 decades was solved, but the solution brought no satisfaction, only a different kind of sorrow. Mark Summers gave one final interview on the 30th anniversary of Kevin's disappearance. I spent 30 years looking for my son, imagining he might still be alive somewhere. Now I know he died just yards from where I last saw him, killed by negligence and then erased by cowardice. There's no justice in this resolution, only truth. But truth, even terrible truth, is better than not knowing. To other families still searching, don't give up. The answers might be horrible, they might take decades to surface, but they will come. Someone, somewhere, knows what happened to your loved one. Someone's conscience will eventually demand confession. To Thomas Rivera, wherever his soul now resides, I don't forgive you, I can't. You stole not just my son's life but 30 years of hope, of possibility, of peace. You watched me suffer and said nothing. But thank you for finally telling the truth. It doesn't redeem you, but it freed me from the prison of not knowing. Kevin would have been 34 now. He might have had children of his own. He might have become a veterinarian. He loved animals so much. He might have done 1,000 things, lived 1,000,000 moments. Instead, he's forever 4 years old, forever asking to see the penguins, forever slipping from my grasp in a crowd. I can still see when I close my eyes. His story ends here. The mystery is solved. The case is closed. But a parent's love, a parent's grief, that never ends, that goes on forever. The Phoenix Zoo continues to operate, welcoming millions of visitors each year. The maintenance areas are now secured with multiple locks and alarms. Staff undergo extensive safety training. Child safety is paramount. But sometimes, usually on quiet mornings before the crowds arrive, zoo employees report hearing something strange near the old penguin exhibit. The sound of a child laughing, the patter of small feet running, a voice calling out in excitement about the animals. They say it's just imagination, just the wind, just the normal sounds of a zoo preparing for another day. But those who were there in 1992, the few still working after all these years, know better. They know it's Kevin, forever excited about the elephants and penguins, forever innocent of the tragedy that awaited him. He's part of the zoo now, not in the horrible way Thomas Rivera made him, but in the way all beloved children become part of the places where they were happiest. His ghost, if that's what it is, isn't vengeful or sad. It's joyful, curious, full of wonder at the animals and the world. It's Kevin as he was that perfect Saturday morning, before everything went wrong. And perhaps that's the only real justice in this story, that Kevin's spirit remains untouched by the horror of his death and the cowardice that followed. He's still the bright-eyed boy who wanted to see every animal, who carefully saved quarters for the penny press, who told his father it was the best day ever. In memory, in spirit, in the hearts of those who loved him, Kevin Summers is forever, at the zoo, forever happy, forever safe. The truth of his death is finally known, but the truth of his life, that he was loved, that he was happy, that he brought joy to everyone around him, that truth is stronger than any tragedy. The case is closed. The mystery is solved. But Kevin's story, like all stories of children taken too soon, echoes on in the hearts of all who hear it, a reminder that every child is precious, every moment fleeting, and every truth, no matter how painful, must eventually be told. The revelation of Kevin Summers' fate sent shockwaves through Phoenix and beyond. After 30 years of speculation, false leads, and conspiracy theories, the truth was both simpler and more horrifying than anyone had imagined. A child's curiosity, a moment of negligence, and 3 decades of cowardice had combined to create one of America's most enduring mysteries. In the days following the public announcement, reporters descended on Phoenix, interviewing anyone connected to the original case. Retired police officers, former zoo employees, and community members who had participated in the search all found themselves reliving that terrible September day in 1992. Detective Patricia Martinez, now 75 and long retired, gave her first interview. About the case in years, it haunted me my entire career. Every missing child case I worked, I thought about Kevin. We turned that zoo inside out, interviewed hundreds of people, followed thousands of leads. To know he was there the whole time, that he died just yards from where we were searching. It's devastating, but it also reinforces something I've always believed. The simplest explanation is often the correct one. We were looking for a kidnapper when we should have been looking for an accident. The Phoenix Zoo faced a public relations crisis, unlike anything in its history. Current CEO Jennifer Walsh held a press conference to address the revelations, while Today's Phoenix Zoo bears no resemblance to the institution of 1992 in terms of safety protocols and staff. We accept responsibility for this tragedy. The systemic failures that allowed Kevin's death and the subsequent cover-up represent the darkest chapter in our history. We are committed to full transparency and have opened all our records to investigators. The zoo announced several immediate measures: a complete safety audit of all facilities by independent experts, mandatory ethics training for all employees, the creation of an anonymous whistleblower system, annual memorial services for Kevin Summers. But for many in the community, these measures felt hollow. Families who had visited the zoo for generations suddenly questioned whether it was safe. Attendance dropped by 40% in the month following the revelation. The investigation into Thomas Rivera's confession continued to uncover disturbing details. Detectives found Rivera's personal journal in his apartment, filled with decades of tormented entries. September 12, 1993. 1 year saw Mark Summers at the zoo again today. He stands at the penguin exhibit for hours. I want to tell him so badly, but I'm a coward. We're all cowards. The boy deserved better. September 12, 1998. 6 years. Robert killed himself. His note said he couldn't live with the guilt anymore. Miguel drinks himself stupid every night. I take pills to sleep and more pills to function. We're all dying slowly, poisoned by what we did. September 12, 2002. 10 years, a decade of lies. Mark Summers looks like a ghost. I heard he hired another private investigator. They interviewed me again, the 5th time. I lied again, the 1,000th time. When does it end? September 12, 2012. 20 years. 2 decades. Kevin would be 24 now. Maybe married, maybe with kids of his own. Instead, he's forever forever dead, forever hidden. I'm in hell, and I put myself here. The journal revealed that Rivera had written multiple confession letters over the years but destroyed them all out of fear. He'd seen therapists but could never bring himself to reveal the truth. He'd considered suicide many times, but felt it would be taking the easy way out. The legal ramifications were complex. With all 3 perpetrators dead, criminal prosecution was impossible. The zoo's insurance company initially balked at paying settlements for a 30-year-old incident, leading to protracted legal battles. Mark Summers found himself thrust back into the spotlight he'd spent years trying to escape. Reporters camped outside his apartment. Documentary filmmakers requested interviews. True crime podcasters analyzed every detail of the case. Most difficult were the letters, hundreds of them from other families of missing children asking if Rivera might have known something about their cases, too. I understand their desperation, Mark told Detective Williams. I lived it for 30 years. But Rivera only knew about Kevin. One tragedy, one cover-up, not a serial situation. The psychological impact on Mark was profound. For 3 decades, hope had battled with grief in his mind. Now, with hope extinguished, he faced pure loss, but also a strange kind of relief. People ask if I'm angry, he said in therapy sessions. Of course I'm angry, but I'm also freed, in a way. The not knowing was its own kind of prison. At least now I can properly mourn my son. Dr. Elizabeth Carter, Mark's therapist, specialized in delayed grief resolution. When someone disappears without explanation, the grieving process is suspended. The mind can't fully accept death without proof. Mark has essentially been in the first stage of grief, denial, for 30 years. Now he can finally progress through the other stages. They met at a quiet cafe in Scottsdale, both nervous about reopening old wounds. I never blamed you, Sandra said, stirring her untouched coffee. I know you did, but I was right there too. We both looked away for a second. Mark nodded, tears in his eyes. I spent 30 years thinking if I'd just held his hand tighter, if I'd been more vigilant, and now we know it wouldn't have mattered. He found that door, went through it, and those men. Sandra's voice hardened. Those men decided their jobs were worth more than our son's life. They sat in silence for a while, united in their grief for the first time in decades. "I have something for you," Sandra finally said, pulling out a small photo album. "Pictures of Kevin I've kept, ones you might not have seen. I thought, maybe it's time we shared these memories instead of hoarding them separately." They spent the afternoon looking through photos, sharing stories, remembering their son as he was, bright, curious, full of life. For the first time since Kevin's disappearance, they laughed together, remembering his funny sayings, his obsession with dinosaurs, his elaborate bedtime stalling tactics. "Remember when he tried to convince us that T-Rex was a vegetarian?" Mark smiled through his tears, and his reasoning was that with such tiny arms, how could they catch anything, Sandra added. The meeting, painful as it was, provided a kind of closure neither had expected. They would never be friends, too much pain lay between them, but they could finally share their grief instead of bearing it alone. Meanwhile, the investigation continued to reveal the extent of the cover-up. Forensic accountants discovered that Rivera had made large cash deposits in the months following Kevin's disappearance, apparently hush money, though the source couldn't be determined 30 years later. A retired zoo administrator, James Morrison, the same security supervisor who'd overseen the initial search, came forward with disturbing information. "I always suspected something wasn't right. The maintenance logs were altered, work orders backdated. When I questioned it, I was told it was a paperwork error. A month later, I was transferred to another department. The message was clear: don't ask questions." Morrison revealed that several employees who'd raised concerns about safety violations in 1992 had been terminated or reassigned. A culture of silence had protected the zoo's reputation at the expense of truth. The Arizona Attorney General launched a broader investigation into the zoo's practices during the 1990s. While most statutes of limitations had expired, the investigation aimed to uncover any other incidents that might have been covered up. 3 months after Rivera's confession became public, another former employee came forward. Maria Gonzalez, who'd worked in the zoo's administration in 1992, revealed she'd been asked to destroy certain maintenance records shortly after Kevin's disappearance. "My supervisor, David Huang, told me there'd been a filing error, and several work orders needed to be removed from the system. I was young, I needed the job, I didn't question it. But I kept copies. I don't know why. Maybe I sensed something was wrong." The copies Gonzalez provided showed work orders for repairs to the filtration room platform, dated 2 weeks before Kevin's disappearance. The repairs were marked as completed, but obviously hadn't been done. Someone had signed off on false paperwork. David Huang, now 71 and living in Florida, denied any knowledge of a cover-up when questioned by investigators. However, financial records showed he'd received a significant performance bonus in October 1992 and had retired early. With a generous severance package in 1993, the web of complicity grew wider. While Rivera, Vasquez, and Chen had been directly responsible for Kevin's death and the immediate cover-up, it became clear that zoo administration had orchestrated a broader conspiracy to protect the institution. 6 months after the initial revelation, a grand jury was convened to investigate institutional corruption at the Phoenix Zoo during the 1990s. Though criminal charges were unlikely due to deaths and statute of limitations, the investigation aimed to provide a complete accounting of what happened. Mark Summers testified before the grand jury, his voice steady as he recounted the search for his son. "I stood in that zoo dozens of times, sometimes just feet from where Kevin died. Zoo employees who knew the truth looked me in the eye and lied. They watched me age, watched me break down, watched me lose everything. My marriage, my career, my sanity, and they said nothing. That's not just negligence, that's evil." The grand jury's report, released in March 2023, painted a damning picture of institutional failure. Safety violations had been routinely ignored to save money. Maintenance records were regularly falsified. Several employees who'd raised concerns were terminated, At least 12 zoo administrators knew or suspected the truth about Kevin's disappearance. The cover-up had been orchestrated at the highest levels criminal charges against David Huang for obstruction of justice, though prosecution was unlikely. Civil liability for the zoo extending beyond the initial incident. Industry-wide safety reforms for zoological institutions. Mandatory reporting systems for workplace accidents, the Phoenix. Zoo's board of directors resigned en masse. A new board was appointed with a mandate for complete reform. The zoo's accreditation was temporarily suspended pending implementation of comprehensive safety measures. Lisa Patterson was appointed as the new CEO with a background in crisis management and institutional reform. Her first act was to establish the Kevin Summers Truth and Reconciliation Commission, tasked with uncovering any other incidents that might have been covered up during the zoo's history. "We cannot change the past," Patterson announced, "but we can face it honestly and ensure nothing like this ever happens again." Kevin Summers died because people chose institutional protection over human decency. That culture ends now. The commission's work revealed several other incidents, none as tragic as Kevin's death, but showing a pattern of negligence and cover-ups. A 1987 incident where a child was injured by an unsecured gate, family paid to keep quiet. A 1994 near drowning. In the seal pool, blamed on parental negligence. Multiple employee injuries in the 1990s that went unreported, systematic falsification of safety inspection records, each revelation deepened public distrust. Many called for the zoo to be permanently closed. Protests were held outside the gates. Longtime supporters withdrew funding, but others argued for redemption rather than destruction. Dr. Sarah Kim, a child safety expert, wrote in an op-ed, the Phoenix Zoo's failures were horrific, but closing the institution won't bring Kevin Summers back. What will honor his memory is transforming this place into a model of safety and transparency. Let Kevin's tragedy be the catalyst for industry-wide reform. Mark Summers surprised everyone by agreeing, "I don't want the zoo closed." Kevin loved that place. He loved the animals, the wonder of it all. Destroying that won't honor him, but it must be rebuilt from the ground up. New leadership, new culture, absolute transparency. Make it the safest zoo in the world. That's the memorial Kevin deserves. Over the next year, the Phoenix Zoo underwent radical transformation. All facilities were renovated with safety as the primary concern. Every employee underwent extensive training in ethics and child safety. Multiple oversight systems were implemented. The entire culture shifted from protection of reputation to protection of visitors. A permanent memorial to Kevin Summers was established. The memorial, dedicated on the second anniversary of Rivera's confession, was more than just a plaque. It was an entire garden dedicated to child safety education. Interactive exhibits taught children about staying safe in public places. Parents learned about vigilance without paranoia. The entrance featured a bronze statue of a 4-year-old boy reaching toward the sky, his face full of wonder. Mark Summers spoke at the dedication. "This isn't just about Kevin anymore. It's about every child who visits this zoo. It's about creating a culture where safety comes first, where truth matters more than reputation, where a child's life is valued above all else." Kevin died because people forgot these simple truths. This memorial ensures they'll never be forgotten again. Sandra added, "Our son loved animals. He was fascinated by the world around him. That curiosity led to his death, but it shouldn't have. Children should be free to explore, to wonder, to learn, but in safety. This memorial represents our hope that no other family will experience what we did." The legal settlements were finally resolved in late 2023. The zoo's insurance company, after protracted negotiations, agreed to a substantial payout to be divided between Mark and Sandra. But more importantly, they funded a national child safety initiative in Kevin's name. The Kevin Summers Foundation was established with 3 main goals: promoting child safety in public spaces, supporting families of missing children, advocating for institutional transparency. Mark became the foundation's first director. finally channeling 3 decades of pain into positive action. Sandra served on the board, marking the first time the divorced couple had worked together since their son's disappearance. The foundation's first initiative was pushing for Kevin's Law, federal legislation requiring mandatory reporting of all accidents involving children in public facilities, regular safety audits of all public attractions, whistleblower protections for employees who report safety violations, criminal penalties for institutional cover-ups. The law passed Congress in 2024, with overwhelming bipartisan support. President Sarah Martinez signed it in a ceremony attended by families of missing children from across the nation. Kevin Summers' story reminds us that our institutions are only as good as the people who run them, the president said. When we prioritize reputation over truth, profit over safety, silence over justice, we betray the public trust. This law ensures that betrayal carries real consequences. The signing ceremony was held at the Phoenix Zoo in the Memorial Garden. Mark and Sandra stood together as the president signed the legislation, both wearing small pins with Kevin's picture. He would have been 36 today, Mark whispered to Sandra. I know, she replied, squeezing his hand. But in a way, he's done more in death than many do in a full lifetime. Every child who visits a zoo safely, every parent who feels confident letting their child explore. That's Kevin's legacy. Thomas Rivera's confession had solved a 30-year mystery, but it had done much more. It had exposed institutional corruption, changed federal law, and transformed how America thought about child safety in public spaces. The other families Rivera had destroyed found their own peace. Robert Chen's widow, who had spent years wondering why her husband had taken his life, finally understood. She established a scholarship in his name for students pursuing ethics in business. Miguel Vasquez's children, who had grown up with an alcoholic father, gained closure about his demons. They started a support group for families of those struggling with guilt-induced addiction. Even Rivera's own family, devastated by the revelation, found a way forward. His daughter Maria became a counselor specializing in moral injury, the psychological damage that comes from participating in acts that violate one's ethical beliefs. My father lived in hell for 30 years, she said in an interview. He created that hell through his choices, but understanding his torment helps me help others who struggle with similar moral injuries. The Phoenix Zoo, rebuilt and reformed, slowly regained public trust. Attendance returned as families recognized it as potentially the safest zoo in the world. Every safety measure was public. Every incident, no matter how minor, was reported. Every concern was addressed transparently. The penguin exhibit, where Kevin had vanished, was completely redesigned. The maintenance door that had been his entry to tragedy was sealed permanently, replaced by secure access in a different location. A small plaque near the viewing area read simply, "In memory of all children, may they explore in wonder and safety." On quiet mornings, especially on September 12th each year, zoo employees still report strange occurrences near the exhibit. Children's laughter where no children are present, small handprints on glass that's just been cleaned, the sound of excited voices discussing the penguins. Most dismiss these as imagination or the power of suggestion, but Mark Summers, who visits every anniversary, believes differently. Kevin's still here, he says, not in some tragic, haunting way, but as the excited 4-year-old who loved this place. He's part of its spirit now, the curiosity, the wonder, the joy of discovery. That's who Kevin was, and that's how he remains. The last entry in Thomas Rivera's journal, written the day before he entered hospice, provides perhaps the most fitting epitaph to this tragic story. September 10th, 2022, I'm dying. The cancer will take me soon. But I've been dead for 30 years. We all have, everyone who knew and said nothing. Kevin Summers died in minutes. We've died by degrees every day since. I know confession won't earn forgiveness. I know the truth won't undo the pain. But maybe, just maybe, it will prevent another tragedy. Maybe some other maintenance worker will remember Kevin and check that safety rail one more time. Maybe some administrator will think twice before choosing reputation over truth. To Kevin, I'm sorry. Those words are pathetically inadequate, but they're all I have. To Mark and Sandra, you deserved the truth 30 years ago. Your son deserved better than cowards like us. To everyone who reads this, when you see something wrong, say something. Don't let fear silence you. Don't become one of the walking dead like us. The weight of a terrible secret will crush your soul. Tomorrow I enter hospice. Soon I'll face whatever judgment awaits. I don't expect mercy. I showed none to that innocent child or his suffering parents. I only hope that my confession might spare others this hell. The truth always comes out. Sometimes it takes 30 years. Sometimes it comes too late to matter. But it always comes. May God forgive us all. The case of Kevin Summers stands as a watershed moment in American child safety advocacy. What began as a family's day at the zoo became a 30-year mystery, and ultimately a catalyst for nationwide reform. The tragedy of one small boy's death exposed systemic failures that, once corrected, protected countless other children. Kevin Summers lived for just 4 years, but his legacy continues to grow. Every safety rail checked, every maintenance log accurately completed, every institution that chooses transparency over secrecy, all trace back to a curious boy who wandered through the wrong door on a sunny September day. His parents, once destroyed by grief and uncertainty, found purpose in their pain. The zoo that failed him became a model for the industry. The men who covered up his death paid with their souls long before their bodies gave out. And somewhere in Phoenix, in a memorial garden where children play safely under watchful eyes, a bronze statue of a 4-year-old boy reaches toward the sky, forever curious, forever innocent, forever reminding us that our children are precious beyond measure and deserving of our most vigilant protection. Kevin Summers is gone, but every child who explores safely, every parent who trusts public institutions, every employee who speaks up about dangers, they all carry a piece of his legacy. In the end, that's the only redemption this story offers. That from unthinkable tragedy and inexcusable cowardice came changes that protect the innocent. Kevin's death was senseless, but his legacy makes sense of it in the only way possible, by ensuring it never happens again. The truth did set everyone free, just not in the way anyone expected. It freed Mark and Sandra from the prison of not knowing. It freed the guilty from their burdens, even as it condemned them. Most importantly, it freed countless future children to explore their world in safety, carrying forward the wonder that Kevin Summers embodied in his too brief life. The case is closed. The mystery is solved. Justice, imperfect and delayed, was served. But the impact continues, rippling outward through time, touching lives Kevin never got to live, protecting children he never got to meet, creating a safer world he never got to see. That's Kevin's true memorial. Not a statue or a garden or a law, but a fundamental shift in how we protect our most vulnerable. Every time a child visits a zoo and returns home safely, Kevin's legacy lives on. Every time an institution chooses truth over reputation, his death gains meaning. In life, Kevin Summers was one small boy who loved animals. In death, he became a guardian angel for all children, ensuring their curiosity leads to wonder, not tragedy. The last image from that fateful day, Kevin grinning by the elephant exhibit full of joy and excitement, remains the truest representation of who he was. Not a victim, not a cautionary tale, but a bright spirit whose light continues to shine, guiding us toward a world where all children can explore, learn, and grow in safety. That's the final truth of Kevin Summers. Love endures, wonder persists, and sometimes the smallest lives cast the longest shadows, protecting generations yet to come. 5 years after Thomas Rivera's confession, the impact of Kevin Summers' story continued to reshape child safety protocols across America. What had begun as one family's tragedy had evolved into a nationwide movement that fundamentally changed how public institutions approached child welfare. The Kevin Summers Foundation, under Mark's leadership, had grown into a major advocacy organization with chapters in all 50 states. Their annual report for 2027 showed remarkable achievements. 47 safety violations identified and corrected at public venues, 156 missing children found through their rapid response. Network 43 states had passed versions of Kevin's Law over $10,000. Institutions had completed their safety certification program. Mark, now 67, had found purpose in his pain. He traveled constantly, speaking at conferences, training safety officers, and lobbying for stronger protections. His hair was completely gray now, his face lined with years of sorrow, but his eyes held a determination that inspired everyone he met. "I can't bring Kevin back," he said at a conference in Chicago, "but I can make sure his death meant something. Every child we protect, every tragedy we prevent, that's Kevin living on." Sandra, remarried and living in Oregon, remained active on the foundation's board. Her relationship with Mark had evolved into a respectful partnership focused on their shared mission. They appeared together at major events, their unity powerful testament to transformation through tragedy. "Grief doesn't end," Sandra explained in a joint interview, "but it can evolve. Mark and I will always be Kevin's parents. That bond survives everything. Divorce, distance, decades. Working together on the foundation lets us parent Kevin in the only way left to us, by protecting other children." The Phoenix Zoo had become the gold standard for institutional safety. Their protocols were studied and replicated worldwide. Annual attendance had recovered and surpassed pre-revelation levels, as families recognized it as one of the safest venues in America. Lisa Patterson, still CEO, reflected on the transformation. "We went through hell as an institution, but we emerged committed to radical transparency. Every incident, no matter how minor, is publicly reported. Every safety measure is openly discussed. Trust isn't rebuilt through PR campaigns. It's earned through consistent, transparent action." The zoo's memorial garden had become a pilgrimage, site for families affected by institutional negligence. The bronze statue of Kevin was surrounded by flowering plants, constantly refreshed by visitors who left tokens of remembrance. On September 12, 2027, the 35th anniversary of Kevin's disappearance, a remarkable gathering took place at the memorial. Families from across the country who had lost children to preventable accidents came together for the first National Day of Child Safety Awareness. The crowd included the Hendersons, whose daughter drowned in an improperly supervised camp pool, the Changs, whose son died from an allergic reaction at a school that ignored his medical alerts, the Williamsons, whose toddler was killed by an unsecured bookshelf at a daycare, dozens more, each carrying photographs and memories. Mark stood before the assembled families, his voice strong despite the emotion. "We are united by the worst thing imaginable, the loss of our children to preventable tragedies, but we're also united by our determination that their deaths will protect others. Together, we're an army of guardian angels, powered by love and loss." The day featured workshops on advocacy, sessions on processing grief, and strategy meetings for expanding safety legislation. But the most powerful moment came during the candlelight vigil at sunset. Each family spoke their child's name aloud, followed by the changes inspired by their loss. Emily Henderson, Pool Safety Act of 2024. David Chang, Allergy Alert Systems in All Schools. Marcus Williamson, Furniture Anchoring Requirements. Kevin Summers, Institutional Transparency Laws Nationwide. The names continued, each representing a life cut short, but a legacy of protection for others. By the end, there wasn't a dry eye. In the crowd, Dr. Patricia Mills, the lead researcher for the Foundation's safety studies, presented groundbreaking data. Since Kevin's Law passed, reported accidents at public venues have decreased by 47%. More importantly, fatal incidents have dropped by 62%. When institutions know they can't hide negligence, they prevent it. The ripple effects extended far beyond America. The European Union had adopted similar transparency requirements. Australia launched a comprehensive review of all public venues. Japan implemented mandatory safety training based on the Foundation's protocols. In Phoenix, the transformation was particularly visible. The city had become a model for urban child safety. Every public park underwent quarterly safety audits. All city employees received child welfare training. A rapid response system connected all venues to emergency services. Public reporting of all incidents was mandatory. Mayor Robert Martinez, no relation to the original detective, credited Kevin's case. One tragedy woke up our entire city. We realized that protecting children isn't just about rules, it's about culture. Every citizen now sees child safety as their responsibility. The legal profession had also been transformed. Law schools nationwide required courses on institutional ethics, using Kevin's case as a primary study. The Rivera Doctrine, that delayed truth compounds original harm, became fundamental to legal ethics training. Professor Angela Thompson, at Harvard Law, explained, Rivera's 30-year cover-up created multiple victims, not just Kevin, but his parents, the community, even the perpetrators themselves. Students learned that immediate disclosure, while painful, prevents cascading trauma. The psychological impact was studied extensively. Dr. Elizabeth Carter, who had treated Mark, published groundbreaking research on suspended grief syndrome, the unique trauma of not knowing a loved one's fate. Traditional grief has stages, a progression, she explained. But when someone vanishes without explanation, the mind can't process the loss. Hope and despair battle endlessly. Resolution, even tragic resolution, allows healing to begin. Her work revolutionized treatment for families of missing persons. Support groups specifically for ambiguous loss formed nationwide, using techniques developed from studying the Summers case. Technology had also been transformed. A new generation of safety systems inspired by Kevin's tragedy were being deployed. AI-powered cameras that detected children entering restricted areas, automated lock systems for maintenance spaces, real-time tracking that alerted staff to unaccompanied children, biometric systems that matched children with their guardians. TechSafe, a company founded by former Zoo IT director James Wang, led these innovations. We asked ourselves, how do we make it impossible for another Kevin Summers to wander into danger? Technology isn't the complete answer, but it's a crucial tool. The media landscape had shifted too. True crime podcasts and documentaries now faced ethical guidelines inspired by the Summers case. Sensationalizing child tragedies was discouraged. Focusing on systemic changes was promoted. Missing, the Kevin Summers Story, a documentary released in 2027, won acclaim for its balanced approach. Rather than exploiting grief, it examined institutional failure and the power of sustained advocacy. Mark and Sandra participated, sharing their journey from despair to purpose. The film's epilogue featured a powerful scene, Mark visiting Thomas Rivera's grave. He stood silently for long moments before speaking. I don't forgive you. I can't. You stole 30 years of truth from us. But your confession, late as it was, sparked changes that protect millions of children. That's not redemption. You don't get that. But it's something. Rest in whatever peace you can find. Educational curricula nationwide incorporated Kevin's story. Children learned about safety without fear, understanding that adults would protect them. The Kevin rules became standard. Always tell a trusted adult where you're going. Never enter areas marked staff only. If you get lost, find someone in uniform. Your safety matters more than being polite to strangers. Child psychologist Dr. Maria Santos praised the approach. We're not scaring children. We're empowering them. They learn that curiosity is wonderful, but it comes with responsibilities. The anniversary gathering in 2027 also marked a significant announcement. The Foundation was launching the Kevin Summers Institute for Child Safety Research, a state-of-the-art facility in Phoenix dedicated to studying and preventing childhood accidents. Funded by settlements and donations, the institute would research accident patterns and prevention strategies, train safety professionals worldwide, develop new technologies for child protection, Provide free safety audits for institutions that couldn't afford them. At the groundbreaking ceremony, Mark and Sandra jointly wielded the ceremonial shovel. As dirt flew, Mark spoke. This institute ensures that Kevin's curiosity, the very trait that led to his death, will now protect children everywhere. He wondered how things worked, explored fearlessly, asked endless questions. This building will do the same, but safely, systematically, saving lives. Sandra added, Our son lived for 4 years, but will protect children for generations. That's the miracle born from tragedy, that love transcends loss, that purpose can emerge from pain. The Institute's design incorporated the latest safety features, but also